everybody, welcome to the Wednesday episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits. Guys, this is a huge episode, and I'm not saying that just to get views or anything like that. No, this is a huge episode. Why? Because we have Mr. Larry Lieber with us talking about his new novel, Chirps, also talking about his time with Marvel. If you don't know Larry Lieber, he is one of the founding fathers of Marvel Comics. You might know his brother, Mr. Stan Lee. He and Larry and Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, so many others helped create the wonderful universes we have now. Larry was a huge part of that. And now he has his book that he's written, and he is so proud of it. And I think you'll hear it in his voice. This is an absolute honor of an interview to do. Without any further ado on my part, Mr. Larry Lieber. Truly comic royalty. Speaking of Mr. Larry Lieber, sir, thank you so much for taking the time today.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure.
Well, we're all here excited to talk about novel you have coming out, Chirps. How long has this story been, percolating with you?
Well, actually, it took some years to write the story, and I finished it a couple years ago, or maybe a couple years ago.
Mhm.
And I was trying to get it published, and finally I decided on self-publishing.
There you go. Now,
But it took quite a while to write.
I was going to say, when you began the project, did you have an endpoint in mind, how you wanted the story to end, or did it just sort of come naturally as the story progressed?
It came naturally as it progressed. I What I knew was I wanted to have a character. I had spent years, just about 60 years, with superheroes, supervillains, and I at first thought of making up someone like a superhero. But I hadn't been following what Marvel was turning out for a long time. I hadn't followed it. And I figured I didn't want to go through it. They have so many that by the time I went through it, I wouldn't be here. So so I said, I've got to come up with the most unlikely figure, some character that nobody at Marvel would think about. So I picked this little bird, a little parakeet. I figured, well, parakeet is 6 inches long from head to the tip of the tail, weighs an ounce and a half. That'll be my hero. Nobody at Marvel would have done that. And that was some time ago. And it took a long time. At the same time, I was still writing I'm not writing, I'm sorry, drawing Spider-Man. And God, well, I was in comics for 60 years, and the last 32 of them, 32, the last years, I was doing drawing Spider-Man, the newspaper strip. So while I was doing the strip, I was starting the book. I kept doing the strip because I was always kind of slow working.
Mhm.
And I said, I've got to get fast. That just bothered me. And it took years to do it. I finally made before I retired, about a year or so before, 2 years, man. No, about a year before I retired, I was fast enough to do the whole week in one day. So that helped me to work on Spider-Man and to finish it, and to do it. I mean, to work on Chirps, and I did. And well, as I said, that's why I picked the character, the small character.
Now, when you're writing for a parakeet that gets human intelligence, how do you start to put this character together? What aspects of the character did you really want to put out there?
Uh, well, I didn't. I wanted him to be a hero, and I don't know. The story I just started off with. Shall I tell about the story? I mean,
Of course.
uh, where he's in danger. I had to have a villain in the story also, and I decided I didn't want to make a whole plot which probably most people do, and I should have, and then work, you know, from the plot. I wanted to have the characters begin the story and let the characters take me where they will. I figured I'd written enough stories that I could trust my instincts. So I had a villain, and it starts in Australia because that's where the parakeets are natively. They come from Australia, and he's a member of a flock there of birds. And I start with my villain who's a poacher, and his name is Rafferty, Muck Rafferty. And I wanted him to be interesting and different. So I made him, he's sort of short, very powerful, strong, long arms, almost simian like in appearance, and wears a slicker, sort of a rain soaked, dirty, oily slicker. And he hears in a bar, he hears somebody speak of an unusual parakeet or a parakeet with an unusual marking on his little breast, marking of a circle with a star in the center of it, and that the man has spotted. And the poacher decides, well, if he could capture him, it would be a very valuable bird. So he sets out to capture him. All this is before the story begins. I just mentioned it. And so we open with him having tracked the bird down or figured out where he is. And the guy is hiding in a bush. And there's the bird. The bird, because of his unusual marking, is sort of an outlier in the tribe or in the flock. The other birds kind of look down on him. He's not one of them completely. And which gives me something to work for, because at the end, if he they may have a different view of him. So he's there on a branch, and the guy wants to shoot him with a stun dart that'll knock him out, put him to sleep. He doesn't want to kill him, but a dart could kill a little bird. So he has the gun trimmed. I don't know how you do it. The velocity is lessened. The dart is smaller, thinner. He's all set, and he shoots the dart at the bird. The bird gets hit, falls off his little perch onto the ground. The poacher is about to go over and retrieve him, and now he'll be able to sell him when suddenly he sees rangers there have spotted him. There are rangers because it's illegal what he's doing, utterly illegal, and they're coming after him. So he doesn't have time to grab the bird. He tries to flee. They capture him, and they are going to imprison him, which they do for a while. Now the bird is just lying there on the ground, sort of dying or mortally wounded. And he lasts, though, for a day or so, or maybe later in the day it happens. I don't remember the next day, later, same day. But my other character comes in who's kind of a hero in the story. And he is a very rich man, an industrialist, a billionaire. Okay. And he's about 65 years old. And when I name characters, I generally try to get fitting names for them. And here I wanted this guy to be good. He's a good man. He's an industrialist, a billionaire who managed the amazing feat of attaining all that wealth while still being a nice guy. He's good to people. He's decent. You like, very moral, very ethical. I don't know if there is such a person or could be, but he is. And I give him the name against type. I call him Wedgeworth. Hedgeworth. If I use the name Hedge, which sounds like hedge funds, I would generally be thinking he's a villain, but he isn't. He's a good guy. Name is C. Morton T. Hedge. Anyway, he's in the area. He's an American, and he's been looking for a site for building a factory in Australia. This is in the outback country. And why he gets out of the car with binoculars, looking around at the areas. And while he's standing there in the grass, he hears a little chirping, a little whimper. What is it? He looks down, and there is the bird with the dart still impaled in him. So he sees this. He bends down, he picks it up, gets angry at who could have done this, and the bird is half dead. He says he's got to save it. He rushes back to the car and tells the guy to take him to the nearest hospital, veterinary hospital, or vet's place. The driver does so. They take him back to a hospital. A veterinarian treats the bird and manages to save his life. Says it's a good thing. You got him here just in time. Now, the man, in the course of this, seeing the bird, he finds himself relating to the bird, almost bonding with him. The man himself is unmarried. He has two sisters who are not exactly lovely people. One is something out of a Charles Dickens novel, very austere and formidable. Her name is Letitia, an appropriate name. And the other one is a little ditzy, nice person, but she has two sons. One, both of whom are not particularly admirable. One, all he does is eat. He's interested in food. And the other one is a conniver. He's always looking for a scheme, an angle, that usually doesn't work. Those are his sons. So this guy doesn't have a family that he can really relate to, is very proud of, but he relates to the bird for some reason, who looks at him with a little parakeet-like eyes, you saved my life. And he convinces the government because he's building a factory. They allow him to take the bird out of the country. You're not allowed to take birds from there, I believe. So he takes the bird on his private plane. He comes back to the United States. Probably, I don't know whether he's going to build the factory or not. We don't really follow up on it. It's not that important. And he brings him back to where he lives, which is in Glen Cove, New York. It's in Long Island, outside of New York, and he lives in an estate, like a little mansion. And he comes home with the bird, and the bird, his family doesn't welcome the bird. What are you messing with a little? He says no, and they're not going to mess with him because while he's a very good man, he's also nobody you want to fool around with. And he's very bright, and if he's forceful, you don't want to go against him. He could be too strong an opponent. So they back off, and he takes the bird upstairs. He's going to keep him in his bedroom, and he puts the bird in the bedroom. Has a bird cage there, and he decides he wants to spend time with the bird. So he even has some of his office moved from wherever his office is in Manhattan, some of it so he can work at home and do some work there. And he has a table, a desk set up, and the bird is there to be like a companion. And this goes on for a few days. Now, most people, if they get a little parakeet, they try to teach it tricks or teach it to say how whatever, pretty birdie, something like that. He doesn't believe in that. He's got even respect for the animal, for the little bird. I don't want to make him a pet. I don't want to do that. I want it to be a little friend. I want to respect. I mean, he's a very unusual guy, a philosopher almost, as well as a businessman. So he's nice to the with the bird. And one day he's on the phone or he's off the phone, and he's doing some work, and he speaks. He says something, maybe talking to himself, and the bird who is nearby answers him. The bird starts, and he looks in amazement. He can't believe it. So he says another thing, and the bird answers that. He realizes the bird can not only, a parakeet can mimic sounds but this is different. He's holding a conversation. So he can't believe it, and he has a groundskeeper there, a nice guy, and he calls the groundskeeper over. I forgot his name, Joe or something. And to hear this, he's amazed too. So they both realize that this bird can speak and has more than that. He has a brain that's like a human brain. He can hold a conversation. So he speaks to him, and the bird he wants to not teach him, but he wants to let the bird become oriented. So the best way, there's a television set there, the news is there. He lets the bird listen to the news, watch television programs, do all that. So the bird is oriented to what our society is like, and what, especially in America, the bird gets all this knowledge, he absorbs it very rapidly. Now, the man realizes that this bird is so unusual and he knows the time in which we're living that people are going to be very suspicious about the bird. Many will say, is it a real bird? Because you could probably make up a bird at this time.
Mhm.
You could make a drone and put him in the guise of a living bird. And people with other countries, we're so mistrustful. Who's doing it? Where did the bird come from? How did that happen? You know? So the man, for the safety of the bird, so he decides that it would be dangerous if the world at large learned about this unique animal, this unique bird, people being suspicious, so on, so forth. And they would want to seize the bird, capture the bird, examine the bird. What is it? And the bird's life would be in danger. So he tells the bird, nobody must ever know. Don't speak outside this room. Keep it quiet. He even takes the bird down to be eat. Finally, the bird wants to get out of the room. He takes them down to have a meal with the family. And the bird keeps quiet. When they get back to the room, he can tell them what he thinks and all that. But somehow, and things happen, I won't go into it because I'll be telling you the whole story. Somebody, word of the bird gets out, and people are going to try. Oh, before word gets out, the nephew learns of a bird, about the bird, and he tries to get it kidnapped, and he can sell it. The conniving nephew, all kinds of. There's so much happening in this story. So the man finally decides that for the bird's safety, he wants to find a sanctuary or a site where he can build a sanctuary for the bird and put the bird there, and he'll be safe. And he has a private plane, of course, flies all over, and he flies over the Amazon. He's down there, and he's looking when his plane crashes. He's in the jungle. His pilot is dead. He's revived by the natives, who I won't tell you why, but they think he's something special. They save his life, but he's down. The rest of the world thinks he's dead. The bird realizes one friend is gone. He's got to get out of there. So the bird leaves. He leaves the place, and he figures, if I get to the city, to Manhattan, there are more places to hide rather than on this estate out here in Glen Cove. So he goes to Manhattan, hopping from car to car, sneaking in. Nobody knows he's there, because of his size. Gets to Manhattan. And when he gets to Manhattan, he sees there's a problem between the pigeons. And when I started this story, we had these, what do you call them? The red-tailed hawks
Yeah.
in the city, and they were eating pigeons
Mhm.
and squirrels. They were nesting on people's windows, and everybody was excited about these red-tailed hawks. Well, the bird comes in the midst of this, and our little parakeet, and he doesn't like it. Here's where we get his character. Because he is a seed eater. He's not a raptor that eats the flesh of other birds.
Mhm.
And so he sides with the pigeons. It's almost like a Western with the sodbusters versus the cattlemen. he's siding with the pigeons, and he leads the pigeons because he has human intelligence. He figures out how to defeat the hawks. And
But do you think you're giving away too much of the plot?
yes, and I'm stopping now. So I won't tell you how he does it, but he figures out how he does it. He later becomes the hero of all the birds. They regard him in high esteem. Now the people are still after him. So the rest of the story is the people trying to get the governments trying to seize him, get him. The family is involved with it. They don't like him. Other things happen. The poacher comes to here to New York. What I have an air battle over Central Park between the bird and the poacher in an airplane. I have all kinds of things going on. And it's a very exciting story, I think.
Most definitely.
So that's my story.
Well, I mean, it's really it kind of, has a little bit of everything for everyone in it. I'm curious, with this book and when you're in comics, when you're creating a character, how do you start? I mean, where does the blueprint begin? Does it begin with a name or an ability or a personality trait? How do you start to build characters?
Well, the way it's usually done is you just have an idea. You think of the superpower, I suppose,
Right.
and whoever does it. Yeah, my brother was who made up the characters Thor and Iron Man, Ant Man, while I wrote the stories, the scripts
Mhm.
from his story, his idea. What he did was, I guess he just thought of somebody who had a certain power, and then that wasn't being used at the time. You know, you don't want two people who can turn on to flame or whatever. And so you make up your character, then you decide, well, what kind of a person would fit it? What kind of a guy is he? And then you get an appropriate name for him, and you name him. When I did the thing with Chirps,
Mhm.
as I said, I wanted a character that I could be assured nobody else had made up a character like this before. And also, it was a task. I said, I'm going to take the most unlikely. I mean, who would think of a parakeet as being a formidable character or somebody to be? But I make him part victim. They're after him, and most of it, much of it, is like he's trying to save himself or keep himself from capture. He has no secret power. He can't zap people and kill them, but he has intelligence and his smallness is you could call a weapon or it's his defense because he can hide any place and flight, and he can also command other birds. He can speak to birds and get them to do. So, I mean, using what would naturally flow
Mhm.
from a bird if he had that kind of intelligence, that was all I did. The
Right.
rest of it is all things that could be logical. They're not just fantastic.
Yeah. I said, do you want to move the camera down a little bit? Because I'm just sort of cutting off your mouth.
Oh,
There you go. Um,
is that all right? Okay.
that's perfect. When you have this project like this where there is more time to do it, I mean, you must be used to working on deadlines. Things have to get out at a certain time, especially with the newspaper. To have sort of the freedom to sort of take your time with this and to do it the way you wanted without, all that pressure. Did that help you as a writer sort of bring more out?
Well, it's even more than that. The reason I wanted to do this is I had been writing comics, and comics are a collaborative effort. I mean, one person writes it, in this case, some of the stuff one person did the plot, one person did the script, me, then one person draws it. Even the drawing, usually one person pencils it, like Jack Kirby pencil, and or John Buscema. and another person inks it, another person colors it, another person letters it. So you've got all these people in this collaborative effort. If it had the feelings of a creator from the beginning. I wanted to do something myself. I wanted to be a painter, and I was unable to. I studied painting, but I was at an age when the Korean War came along, and I had to give up the course of painting. I had to go into the Air Force. I went in the Air Force for 4 years. So then I came back, and later I studied illustration at the Art Students League. And I had to give that up in the middle, of
Mhm.
the course. So I never really became a painter. I got close to it in that I married a woman who was a painter, but it was it wasn't me. So I wanted to do that. So, but the desire to create was always within me. And my wife, unfortunately, was ill. I won't go into that, but throughout the marriage, she was ill before the marriage and during the marriage, and we were only married 17 years. And we didn't have children, we couldn't. And she died. When she died, I felt the need to create. Comics wasn't doing it. And I felt that even if I were a painter, painting wouldn't do it. Somehow I wanted to write, to express myself some way. But I had never written anything but a comic. I had never written a book, a novel, a story. And I felt, well, that's prose. And the conventional wisdom is if you've never written a novel, don't start with a novel. Start with a short story. I thought that was good advice. So I wrote a short story. And by this time, let's see, it was after my wife died, I couldn't write at all. But 10 years later, I met another woman. We fell in love and we didn't get married, but she became my life partner. And she had been involved with the ballet. Now, that intrigued me. But I knew she was now retired and I would never be able to see her dance. So that gave me the idea for a short story. I didn't want to write about this, about a retired dancer, but I took the story and set it back at the time when I was young during the Korean War. And I made the man blind. He's been a veteran who has been blinded over in the Far East during the war through an accident in not the war, but through an accident in the motor pool. And he's now retired. They, discharge him, medical discharge, and he's living in Manhattan. And he goes to Central Park and he meets a woman who's a ballerina with the New York City Ballet. And she's kind of depressed. He's depressed, of course. This is the blindness. He has to adjust to it. She's depressed because she has a brother, her only relative, who was in Vietnam, Korea, and he was killed, just killed. So she's very bitter and depressed, and he's different. And they meet, and they form an attachment. They help each other, and they let's say they fall in love. But then he realizes that because he can never see her dance, um, she's being cheated. He knows how hard dancers work, especially ballerinas. They starve themselves, they work hard from childhood. It's very austere things they go through. And she deserves to have a man in her life who can see her dance and appreciate it. He'll never be able to tell her how wonderfully she danced. So he wants to break it off. It's not fair to her because he loves her. She should have the best, and he ain't the best, he thinks. She doesn't feel that way. And so they got this conflict there, and she resolves it, which I won't tell you how, because it's a story that would spoil it if you ever want to read it. But I thought that maybe I was picking a thing that was too extreme. Would it be plausible? But I've shown it to different people, and they all said it's a lovely story, and not one person said it's not plausible. Oh, that wouldn't be. So it was all right. I was very glad with it. But what do you do with one short story? I would have sent it to the New Yorker, but the New Yorker, I read their stories. They're all, in today's world, they're edgy stories. They're all sharp. I'm writing like somebody from the 1950s. How do you do, ma'am? Here's well, not that far back, my calling card. That's not the world today.
Right.
So I just took it and I got something of writing out of it. And then I said, now I'm ready for a novel. But I wasn't for the novel that I felt I wanted to write, a very meaningful novel. I said, you better try a novel that is easier for you. What have you been doing? Comics all these years. Well, I don't want to do a comic, but well, a compromise. So I think my bird is a little bit of a superhero, and some of the comic training is good because when I finished it, I showed it to one person who said to me, I like reading your book because I can visualize everything. It's like scenes in a movie. So I said to him, well, I've been writing comics and that's sequential art. So that's where my training is. I think visually and I'm an artist. So I could see where that's the type of writing. I do think where it won't be dull, pictorial, if your imagination. I don't just have two people in a room for 30 pages. So that's how I got to write the chirps thing.
What I find really, I mean, so many things I find fascinating about you and your career, but you spoke a little bit with working in comics. I wonder about the discipline because you were writing books, and this also goes for novels too, but you're writing all sorts of different books from Westerns to superheroes and stuff like that. When you're focusing on a story, how did you kind of keep the blinders on and focus just on the story you're working on and not be like, hey, you know what? This might be good for this, or hey, what if I did this and just sort of focus because you're working on so much stuff.
Well, you're not doing it all at once. When you're doing that, you have to think of that.
Right.
You have to. And if you're doing a comic, you're doing it for other people. They're depending on you. You have a deadline. Somebody asked me when I was writing Chirps, I spoke to some people I knew from Marvel. We were having lunch, I said I have to. I'm writing chirps. And the fellow said to me, let me see how he said, well, you don't have to worry. You don't have a deadline with chirps. I said, yes, I do. He said, what's your deadline? I said, death. I mean, here he's talking to a guy my age. That is my deadline. Yeah. So I had to now it's my deadline for the book I'm writing after chirps. But when I wrote chirps, I remember one thing. I remember being in the apartment and writing it, and my life partner was here with me, and she was over in the alcove, and I turned to her and I said, honey, I said, I have never been as happy writing anything as I am writing this or doing anything because it was mine and it was mine alone. I said, I never again want to do a collaborative thing. I don't want to, and writing a novel is the only form outside of painting a picture, but it's unique in these respects. It's the only form that doesn't include other writing, other people. I mean, if you write a comic, as I said, you got an artist, you got an inker, a colorist, all that. If you write a stage play, you're going to have actors.
Mhm.
They're acting. They can enhance it or make it worse. A movie, the same thing. You've got actors. I've seen many a movie with a mediocre story. I don't even care that much. It's like every other, but the actor is so, I'm so interested in it, where I like him so much that I enjoy watching him speak, move, reach for his gun, whatever the heck he's doing. I just enjoy watching this guy. So, how much of it is the story and how much of it is the actor? He plays a big part. And if it's an actor who isn't, but I'll tell you, in movies, I've seldom seen a picture. It happens, but seldom a movie that was ruined by bad acting. Usually it's a story, you know. The actors are generally good enough, but a very fine actor or somebody that appeals to you makes a big difference. But here, it's all the word. You've got to write the whole thing, get the reader's attention, and if it's good, it's good. If it isn't, it isn't. Then I ran up against the problem of I had two other things, so I might as well tell you. When I did CHIRPS, when I finished it, I decided this is mine. I finally have something that's all mine. I said, I do not want it mutilated, changed, or enhanced by an editor. So I set down a condition which I told my my agent. I said, I don't want anybody editing this unless they do it for something like grammar or spelling. Yeah, I don't want to have words, but I don't want somebody saying, "Oh, this part is dull. Get rid of it." Or I think if you took this and put it over here, put it at the beginning, it would read better with this. I didn't want that. I had read once that I think it's in his. I don't. It may be in Tennessee Williams' memoirs. I don't know. Some book about him. He was friends with Gore Vidal, the writer, and they were good friends. And Williams wrote a story, and he gave it to Gore Vidal to read. And Vidal read the story, and he came back and he made a lot of corrections on it, and he gave it back to Williams. He wanted to help. Williams looked at the corrections. He said, "Well, this is very good and interesting, but it's not mine. It's not me." And that's right. It was Vidal writing this. And Vidal said Williams was right. It wasn't him anymore. So because I had never had my own art, it
Mhm.
isn't like I had paintings I sold that were just all mine. I was jealously guarding this. I didn't want it. So I said, no, no editing unless what I said. The other condition I set down, which is a harsh one, I had read the three most successful books. What is it? The Harry Potter, the Hunger Games,
Mhm.
and the Shades of Gray. That's yeah, all right. All three came in units of three at least. The Harry Potter, there were many sequels to it.
Mhm.
The Hunger Games, I think there were three books, and Shades of Gray three. So I figured Chirps is the kind of book it ends, so there could be a sequel to it. But I said I don't want to write a sequel to Chirps because the Chirps isn't the book I really want to write or try to, and I don't know if I'll literally live long enough to write it. I'm kind of slow if Chirps took me this long. So I don't want to write a sequel. So an editor might say, well, I don't want this unless we can get a sequel, or I don't want this unless I can make changes to justify my job. Also, I felt the whole business of editing, anybody can take, well, maybe not anybody, but anybody in the literary field can take a story and improve it. You know, the trick is to take a blank piece of paper and put something good on it. And the difference between what the writer writes and what the editor makes of, I don't think matters that much. I personally,
Mhm.
usually it doesn't. It's not, so what? It's still going to be good. The basic idea is the writers. I like sketches that a writer does that are unfinished. I enjoy, or not that a writer, that an artist does. I enjoy looking at sketches, And I just didn't. I mean, and nobody walks into. I was seeing the similarity between painting and writing. Nobody walks into a gallery, an art gallery, and says, "Oh, I like that painting." But I think there's a little too much yellow there. Could you have the artist put less yellow and a little more? I mean, you either buy it or you like it or you don't. And taste, what is it? Who knows about taste? Van Gogh, Van Gogh sold one painting in his lifetime. And today, those same paintings, you couldn't afford to buy them. They're so valuable. So what happened? The paintings didn't change. You know why? I believe when what's his name? F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote Great Gatsby. It got poor reviews, I believe. And later on, it was discovered on the college campuses. Oh, this is a great book. Then it fell out of favor again. I mean, these things change. Anyway, that's enough. But that explains what I was going. You ask me what you want. Go ahead.
I'm very curious because art is so much in your blood. So when you were doing comics and writing, did you like having a collaboration with the artist to make sure that your words are matching what's going on the page artistically?
Oh, when I was doing comics, I no. I was resigned to the fact I just didn't want him to. I can tell you about my artist story. I discovered that no story is artist proof, by which I mean there's almost no story that can't be ruined by an artist. So you have to have a good artist.
Yeah.
Um, I once did, well, I'll tell you a classic. I once did a story.
Don't badmouth anybody.
Yeah, I don't, maybe I shouldn't say it,
Ah,
but no story, any story can be changed. You can
right.
have, because artists very often look for ways to take shortcuts.
Gotcha.
And if you're lucky enough to have gotten an artist like Jack Kirby, he wants to put as much as he can in. He's devoted to the story. Jack Kirby was, and he will put a great deal in. And drawing, he was a wonderful artist. I considered him the essential comic artist. I considered my brother the essential comic book writer. I'll tell you what I mean by that. And together, I thought they were the best team,
Mhm.
Stan and Jack. But what I mean by that is, if you wrote better than Stan, you weren't writing a comic. If you wrote less than Stan, you were writing a comic, but the comic could be better. He was about as good as you could and still keep it a comic. And I felt that about Jack's drawing. You could draw better than Jack, as John Buscema did, but it's more than a comic. It's really an illustration. And you could draw less than Buscema or less than Kirby, and it's not a good comic drawing.
Right.
So that's what I mean by they were the perfect ones.
I also
And yeah, anyway.
I just also wanted to speak briefly because you spoke about doing the Spider-Man comic strip, and we've spoken to a number of people who worked on comic strips for different characters. And what I think a lot of people don't know is that's like a never-ending cycle. That's a machine that just keeps on going because it's always has to keep coming out. I know, a lot of artists, a lot of writers sacrifice vacations. They sacrifice time with family because they have to keep getting this stuff out. Can you talk a little bit about the hustle that goes into doing a comic strip like
Well, I can tell you this about it when you talk about the sacrificing time. It has to do with inking. I was not an inker,
that?
basically. The inkers in comics are people who have developed a kind of style, I think. Maybe I'm not the best person to speak about them, but this is what I think. So the inkers have their own style. When I was penciling, uh, after a while, I had seen the work of the newspaper strips of Stan Drake. I don't know if you're familiar. He did a strip called The Heart of Juliet Jones, and he was very good. It was very alive. It was beautiful. my kind of drawing or the
Mhm.
kind I admire. And I tried to draw that way. But the inkers didn't ink that way. They have a simple way of doing. And to me, it's almost a little plastic compared to what I was going for. They have to do it to get their pages out. They can't do a lot of line work on the eye and on the. I mean, it has to be a simple way to do. Okay, so but when I penciled, I never quite got what I wanted, but I settled for it. At least I got good inking. I worked with an inker, my favorite, and who happened to be a friend of mine, uh, was Frank Giacoia, and he was a very fine inker and a wonderful guy. And when I when I started doing Spider-Man, I had inkers on, and I had Mike Esposito. He was doing a good job. I All right, but I reached the point I wanted to do my own inking. Now, as I told you before, as I said before, I was slow. So the only way I could do my own inking, because the penciling took a whole week for me, was to stay up all night. Now I forget how old I was. I was certainly in my 50s now, and I went into my 60s with this. I would stay up one night a week after I finished penciling it all night long. I would just keep working and ink. My poor wife, we had a little dog, a little Yorkshire Terrier. She would be lying in the bed, sleeping in the bed with the dog, and I'm a few feet away inking, trying not to scratch too heavily to wake her up, and doing inking all night long and keeping myself awake with Coca-Cola or something. And I didn't drink coffee, that much coffee at the time. And but I got the inking I liked,
Yeah.
and it meant a lot to me. I did this for, I believe, 7 years, this routine. And the next morning, when the strip was finished, if it wasn't finished, my wife herself, as I said, she painted, so she could handle a brush. She might put a few blacks in for me, a wall black, but generally I finished it. And then I'd wake myself, it's blink my eyes, get awake, and go. I'd go down to King Features, and I would deliver the work at the last minute, and then I'd leave King Features and I get a bus back. And one day I was standing waiting for the bus when I was trying to think of something with numbers, and I couldn't think of any numbers. And I said, "Uh-oh, I think it's time to stop. This is too much. When I reach a point, I can't." And so after that, I gave up the inking. Somebody else did it. I had different inkers, and I let somebody else do the inking. But I enjoyed it most when I was also inking.
Right. I have a very loaded last question for you right here, and that is,
Okay.
what is Larry Lieber at his best? If somebody asked you, what do you do for a living? And what would you give them to say, this is me at my best? This is me, my writing, my art at its best.
Well, I don't know. I honestly don't. I'd say it's probably what I consider me. I mean, I earned a living drawing and writing comics.
Mhm.
And I guess other people would have to judge whether they like my drawing better than the writing or not. Well, I consider the thing I did best from my point of view is the book I've just finished here, Chirps, because it's all mine. It's my story, and I took all the knowledge that I had and the experience, and it's close enough to the kind of story that I did in comics that that it's almost the culmination of it, or Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Synthesis.
I don't know. It's the it it's the achievement that could only have been made, the experience that went into this in storytelling. If otherwise I could not have taken a story and let my characters take me where I didn't know the end. What I did was I have one incident as interesting as I could make it, and then I say, now where do we go? So I was like a reader. Where would I like to go? No, that's been done. Let me try this. Oh, I got it. This is different.
Right.
This is that. I hope I can do it. Well, you'll learn to do it. Gee, I don't speak that line. Ah, you learn. And I would try things for the basic idea of making it different. And I did surprise some people, and I think that's would hold the reader's interest. It may not be if somebody smashing into other worlds, like a super duper hero, but in its own way, it's different. And that's what a reader would want, something different, something interesting, and it all makes sense.
Did you?
I One of the things that bothered me with stories, especially movies or some novels, is that I want to know more about the people. That's another thing. One of my feelings about books. I don't care when I've seen movies or read a book and the guy says there were trees, there were elm trees. Okay, that's fine. I don't care if they're elm trees or birch trees or any, who gives a damn? I want to know about people. And if I have anything that I felt deprived, it's I didn't know about the man, or he didn't do enough, the good guy and the bad guy, or what went on. It's the people I'm interested. So I brought that feeling with the book. I tried to get these people so you feel you knew them and you didn't feel, gee, I wish I knew more about him. I tried to give as much as I could about the people, and I tried to make it unusual. And as I said, I played against type when I named the guy Hedgeworth,
Right.
and I made him such a wonderful guy. And so uh, I enjoy this the most. I think this is the best I've done. I think so.
Well, it sounds like it's a book that's a lot of fun, and it's a book that is going to appeal to a lot of readers. And it's a book that obviously, just by speaking to you this time, your heart is into it. This is your book. This is your
Yes.
world that you created, and it's a pride and
I
joy.
I I I felt at times I never had children. I almost felt these characters. I don't know if I guess some other authors do. I never thought of it when I was doing it, but or maybe I did. But I feel like they're my children.
Yeah. And we are back. Yeah, I can't believe we have a chance to speak to Larry Lieber. What a wonderful, wonderful guy. Top of the mountain in comic book history. And you could tell, like, this book is, as he said, this is the proudest that he's been of something he's written. It is all him. It sounds like a wonderful, wonderful book. The Kickstarter, I believe, might be over, but you could probably still get involved with it at this point as well. So first, I have to thank Mr. Danny Fingeroth, the legendary Danny Fingeroth. Thank you so much, my friend, for helping set this up. Mr. Lieber, thank you for taking the time to do this. This is top of the mountain for me here. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. And make sure you pick up Chirps when it comes out. And we will see you on Friday.